human leadership deeply starts with me, the leader, being human myself and my own awareness of that. It doesn't mean I'm suddenly some kind of perfect psychological expert, spiritual person, who understands everything about human nature. It's more about me understanding my imperfections and embracing them and not feeling like I have to show up as the person who has all the answers. We're in this process at the moment where we've got these two tides, a tide coming in and a tide going out. And I think there are many leaders who are caught in that tidal change and are finding it quite difficult to know what to do and how to be. The answer to it is you need to be yourself.
Welcome to the Hospitality Maverick podcast with me, Michael Tingsell. We at Hospitality Mavericks are here to inspire leaders to create heart-centered and profitable businesses from the inside out, the kind that both employees and customers love and support. And thank you to Biz Simply for sponsoring this episode as our show partner. And Biz Simply is the all-in-one HR, workforce management, roles and operations software designed and built by hospitality experts to make every shift run like clockwork. And we join forces to help the industry to find new ways to become even more innovative in how we lead our people, how we operate, and how we grow our businesses, to how we serve our customers. And together, we want to share strategies, tools that can make the industry thrive long-term, not just survive. And in this week's conversation, we'll go on a journey into how we as leaders need to change our approach to leadership to ensure we get the best out of our people, as well creating an environment they will thrive in. And for this, we have a very special guest, Paula Leach, who is passionate about great leadership and the difference it can make in organization and the wider world. She is an author, a speaker on leadership, and she works as an executive coach and advisor and have a huge background as a chief people officer and executive with more than 25 years of experience in corporate multinationals and large-scale complex public sector organizations. And we start the conversation discussing the question, why do we need to change the approach to leadership? We discuss the current state of the world, pandemic, climate change, the need for businesses to be a force for good, and also, due to all this, we actually need to find a different approach, and it starts with leadership and how we build our organization. We talk about how leadership tools and people practice really have to be pragmatic, practical, and simple to have an impact in the organization. To get the time they need in the busy day for leaders and teams. Paula gives some great examples on how she approached helping leaders developing approaches that maximize the impact on the organization and its people. Paula talks about how we have gone from a more task-based leadership approach to a more humane leadership approach, which means that we as leaders need to unlearn and learn new ways. That meaning diving into ourselves and also think about how we lead others. She believes that the advancement of technology has actually already enabled us to lead more humane. We just need to lean into it. And she says that it's about enjoying the journey, else she believes it can become very, very hard just a couple of years down the line as technology advances. We talk about the power of teams getting more involved in making the plans and making decisions. We also talk about how that for many, many leaders feels as a big threat, giving their people the freedom to do this because they start asking themselves questions. What is my role? Will I lose my job? And how do I deal with it? Paula also talks about the importance of making space and think and connect with yourself as a leader to make sure you have the clarity and energy and emotional headspace to deal with all the uncertainty that's coming. Along the way, we talk human to machine, machine to human. We talk leadership trends and shifts going on right now, how to work differently and keep pace with the speed of technology, leaders' role in creating clarity and get out of the way, the power of belonging to a culture, learning mindset, FOMOs, and leading with heart, and much, much more. Before you tune in, please sign up to our weekly newsletter on hospitalitymavericks.com, packed with more Maverick insights, strategies, and tools. Now, please grab a notebook. I'm sure this conversation will move your thinking about leadership. So let's get started. I'm super excited about today's subjects because, as the guest already had discovered in our pre-conversation before we go live, it's something I'm deeply passionate about. We're going to be talking about this big subject that's called leadership and how we become better at it. And I think, especially in the times we're going through now, there's no better time to revisit the leadership book. I think most of us has been through the crisis management. Now we are in this kind of new world where we need to find new ways and new approaches to create these cultures we want to create, actually, so we get the best out of people, because I think that's what every leader wants. And for that, I'm very lucky to be joined by Paula today. And Paula is not just an expert on leadership. She's been a senior leader herself for years in corporate life. She's written a book about this, which we're going to touch around today. So welcome to the show, Paula. I'm really, really excited about what we're going to be talking about today, because when I read your book, I was just nodding all the way through. I said, why had no one thought about writing it so simple and plain as this before?
Thank you so much, Michael. It's lovely to be here, and thanks for inviting me. Really looking forward to the conversation.
So for people out there that haven't had your book in their hand, haven't seen your content you're doing on LinkedIn and so on, what is it that your business is about, and why did you started it, and where do you come from an approach to leadership?
Yeah, and well, maybe I'll start with that. So, my background is I've been working as a people leader, supporting leaders in organizations, being a leader myself in various different organizational settings for over 25 years. So I had a long corporate career, an international career with a large multinational. I've worked in large-scale public sector. So I was Chief People Officer at the UK Home Office. And then I've been Chief People Officer in a large global high-growth organization as well, more of an entrepreneurial setting. And throughout all of that time, I rose up through the leadership ranks. So I've been on my own interesting journey, understanding myself and what does leadership mean to me and what works and what doesn't. And I've also observed a lot of leaders as well and the effectiveness of various different styles. And then alongside that, certainly as a Chief People Officer, the degree of conversations I would have, hopefully as a safe space for people to have that kind of conversation with people in very senior positions, asking questions about their effectiveness and asking questions about how they felt leading in the status quo or whatever environment they were in, and some of the challenges that they had. And so that led me to two things. It led me to write my book, thank you, which is called Vantage Points. And I know we'll talk a little bit about some of those principles in the book today. And the book is really so pragmatic because I'm pragmatic, because most leadership books are wonderful. They're either research books, which are evidence-based, written by wonderful professors, or people who are bringing new empirical data. That's amazing. On the other hand, they might be books that are written by successful CEOs who are telling their stories, and they're really interesting too. My book isn't either of those things. It is really sits in the middle of that. It's very much an observational piece, but completely pragmatic, almost like I'm sort of sitting alongside the reader, really thinking about what's the point of your role as a leader, and how can you work your way through that on a day-to-day basis and make an impact. So that's really what the book is all around. And it really is targeted to anyone, whether you lead 10 people or 100,000 people. My observation would be that those principles are the same. So that's one. And then the second thing it led me to was setting up my business, which is now just fantastic. So many interesting conversations, so much interesting work now moving forwards. And I do two main things. So I coach and partner with senior leaders and executives, helping them through that practical day-to-day journey, being a thought partner, if you like. And then I also provide advisory and mentoring services on anything to do with the strategic side of leading thriving cultures and people change in organizations. So yeah, that's what I do. That's my background. And I'm simply passionate about the potential of all of us, the potential of people. And the leader's job is to harness that in ourselves and in our people.
So when you work with your client, what is it that, what is that your unique thing that you think that you are bringing to the table, and what is it that they're coming for you to have, besides you have an incredible experience and wisdom from that?
Well, for me, it probably is. I said it when I was talking about the book and the advice in the book, but it really is pragmatism, because I, I'm I've worked with, some amazing thought leaders and consultants over the years. The trick, though, is converting that, in my experience, into things that work on a day-to-day basis when the reality of life is that the schedule is full, you're being pulled in this pillar to that pillar. Everyone doesn't agree. So you can do lots of work with teams, but there's always different dynamics at play. And so, my interest in working with people is really making sure that the things that we do, that we invest in, that we make an impact around, are the things that genuinely will make a difference. And I suppose the other piece to the sort of the mirror image of pragmatism is simplicity. So, and I know we'll probably touch on this in terms of the complexity of everything that leaders are facing right now. The most important part of leadership is being able to create simplicity out of complexity, because that's how you create momentum for yourself and for groups of people. So I think that piece of absolute pragmatism and a focus on the human aspect of making things happen, because at the end of the day, really that's all we've got in terms of the resources around us, how we can influence things as leaders. So it's the human aspect and the practical aspect. I'm heavily focused on, if I'm working with a client, we want to do things that embed, sustain, and make a difference for the long term, not that we do and look shiny and look great in a presentation, but don't really make a difference to the people in your organization and to, the progress that you're trying to make.
Yeah, and we can dive into it a bit later, because I think that what's really interesting is there's a lot of great books on leadership, as you say, a lot of thought leadership, like empiric things. But there's that thing, and then how do I then apply it into my crazy schedule? And how do I get the energy to do it? Because some of it is quite hard sometimes as well. There's like a change you need to do within yourself and within your team. And not everybody is jumping on. It's a bit like the maturity curve is not straightforward. It's like you need to work on it, and how to actually make it so simply work. So we'll come back to that. So I really like that, because I think, there's a lot of great books I read as well where I said, okay, I can maybe take one thing out of here and practical implement, but I need to think myself how I do that. And I think that's the key thing as well, as we go into, and we'll talk a bit more about complexity, as you're spot on, especially for listeners out there. There's a lot of complexity hitting right now, and it's probably not over for a very near future. What about also, I saw when I checked something, you're doing the Vantage Points Foundation. You're launching that very soon, and I thought that was very, very interesting. It's for women in leadership as well. You're trying to create a platform. Can you tell a bit more about that and what that's about, and what people can expect when that goes live? I guess it's very soon. It's in June, isn't it?
Yeah, we should be launching in June. So yeah, thanks for the opportunity to share a little bit about this. So when I decided to set up the business, I absolutely knew that I wanted to set up a business that was shared value right from the start. And actually, many people have said to me, "Oh, why don't you get the business up and running and then start the foundation, at a later stage?" And my view was, no, I'm not going to do that. So a portion of everything that the business makes goes into the foundation, um, and supports the growth of that foundation. And the point of it is really back to my overall interest and my overall purpose, which is that everybody has amazing potential. What I've noticed, over the years, being a female, in many male-dominated industries myself, and also working with women so much. I do a lot of work with women and a lot of work on women's programs. The needle is still not being moved fast enough. We're moving, but it's quite glacial. Is it sustainable? I don't know. And so I think that my small part that I wanted to play was, I want to find these amazing young women, because I know they're there, who are at the start of their careers. And they might not have the social capital that my daughters have and will have when they get to this stage in their career. They're a little bit younger. But what we wanted to do was make sure that we don't lose the momentum that these young people might be bringing. So we are coaching them, we are inspiring them, we are creating networks for them, hoping to provide some work experience as well, so that they can truly reach for their dream careers and feel inspired to be completely themselves. So, and reach for that completely. So that's exactly what we're looking to do.
That sounds really, really interesting, especially in these times where people are really looking for, how do I get the best out of myself? How do I future secure myself? And that maybe leads into to my next question about, because with all this happening, we don't have to analyze the pandemic. We're in the middle of it. We're probably not out of the woods yet. I think any industry, you will know that leaders has been under huge pressure, no matter what level they at. They had to really find ways of running and operating the business. The industry, which we cover mostly, the hospitality industry, is just about now starting to see revenue is coming back in some kind of level that is close to normal, but there's still so many challenges to deal with. Why is it important for you? You talk a lot about it in your book and in general your content. You talk about it's a good time now in history actually to stop up and actually reflect a bit about our approach as leaders and how we've done things.
Yeah, so you talked about the complexity piece, and I think this is the shift. So if you think about leadership over the last 200 years or so, we've been through these various shifts as technology has enabled us to create and optimize the sort of the mass capability of humans, right? So if we sort of talk about it on that macro scale. So first of all, technology enabled us to move into industrialization, but people were still very much, part of that sort of physical process. That became very much automated. We then moved into people being very much part of the sort of knowledge-based, the task-based part of business. Through AI and various different aspects, that's being automated. So we're now in and forward, from today, we are in more of what I call a human leadership age, which is, that the leader's responsibility is to optimize the capability of the human to machine interface and the human to human interface. And I think this brings with it a huge amount of additional complexity because things are moving very fast paced. You've got globalization, you've got, economic challenges, you've got a joined up world in a way we just hadn't experienced previously, that it is now just so much of a system for leaders to be able to work with. And we've got this human aspect. Now, there's a challenge with it, but there's also just a beautiful opportunity with it as well. So the challenge is that's different. It's different to what, when I was growing up as a leader, I saw leaders above me doing. So what I learned, because that was more task-based leadership, this pace of change has happened so quickly, that we've got to leadership positions and we're having to lead differently to those who came before us. So that's a real challenge, and it's all very, continuing to move with that fast pace and uncertainty. On the other side, and I don't hear much about this, so I love to kind of just bring this thought into the equation, which is, if you rise up into thinking about human beings and the fact that we, are such an amazing species on the planet, what has actually created our ability to evolve, etc. It is the fact that we're social, the fact that we're creative and imaginative, and the fact that we're innovative. And through going through these phases, we're almost freed again from, technology has freed us to be able to make the most of those human characteristics. Now, I think that is really interesting and really fascinating. The challenge for the leader is to sort of go full circle, if you like, because we are now leading in a very human context versus leading task. And it's a shift. Is it any more difficult than leading tasks? Well, it depends. It might feel very different. And so we're having to learn new skills at a point in our careers where we thought we might have actually known more. And I think that might feel quite challenging too.
So what you're saying is almost that we as leaders almost are in this period of time because society have moved. The pandemic has probably fast forward some things that maybe would happen slower. We almost need to unlearn some things we've learned, and we thought that was the algorithm to do it right.
Yeah, I do think that's right. And I think, oh gosh, everything has a power and a shadow side to it. And I suppose our choice is how we choose to view that. So we can either view that as really scary, oh, I don't want to do that, I want to resist that. Or we can view that as, wow, how interesting. I get to lead and learn about leadership in different ways, in different phases through my career because of this pace of change. How interesting is that? How stimulating is that? And the truth of the matter is, the change has happened. So it's whether you resist it or whether you embrace it. This change has already occurred because technology enabled it. So stepping into that from a positive mindset, a growth mindset, if you like, is a really brilliant opportunity for leaders. But it's a really different way of approaching your day job, actually. Whereas if you resist it, I think it will come upon you in waves over the next coming few years anyway, and that could end up feeling quite frustrating. And will it feel challenging? And does it feel challenging? Yes, of course. But leadership is a challenging job.
Is there like some trends that you are seeing that like really drives this? Is there like some shift? You say this is the top trends I'm basing things on, and this is what I can see, that you can almost say it's what in principle the people want, or the employees, they actually have different, needs, and they want to see something different, I guess it's all about as well.
Yeah, so I'm doing some research at the moment, which will fuel a publication later on this year that I'm going to do. So on the back of writing the book, I just had so many interesting conversations that it prompted me to do this next level of research, which is also helping to inform some of my coaching practice and signature program that I'm launching soon. And in that research, I'm about halfway through it. I'm asking senior leaders and senior HR professionals as well, so a mixture, about this type of question. So this isn't just my view, this is actually what I'm learning. And definitely there is a need for the two things that are coming up more than anything are empathy and agility as the skill set required for the future, driven by demographics. So the generational changes. I mean, we've been talking about millennials for ages, but in actual fact, the real shift is going to come with Gen Z. So this requirement for people to feel a real sense of belonging and a real sense of purpose in what they're doing, and leaders needing to kind of adapt to that. Otherwise, people will just go elsewhere. So there's something around that demographic. Definitely a shift happening around technology. But it's not all about the technology, it's about the human enablement that technology brings. And therefore, it's the really similar principle to what I just talked about in terms of that, it's about human to human and human to machine interface. So that's the second thing. And then the third thing is this broader awakening and understanding that we are all part of a bigger system, bigger world. So whether it's the environmental challenges, I would say, and a lot of the people that are part of this research have said, COVID in and of itself didn't cause these shifts and changes, but what it has done is served as an accelerator to many of these things that were happening. So mental health, for example, and people's overall well-being and health in the workplace, we're talking about it in ways we weren't just over a year ago. that was always coming through as another aspect of what we needed to take care of, because that increased pace gets to a point where you have to do things differently, because the human physical body, mental body cannot keep up with the technological pace of change. So we have to work differently as humans in that system, and leaders have to too. So they're the sorts of themes that are coming out through the research, but also that definitely are confirming what I had already been seeing and watching over actually quite a number of years.
Yeah, it's super interesting because I agree as well in how I observe it, and we're doing not just exact, but also looking at the industry, what it means for a workforce kind of, and we see similar trends. And it's really interesting to talk about the human to machine, and we call it the people to technology. That interaction, actually, if you look at it at a positive spin, actually, you can actually use technology to free people from doing machine tasks, inputting things into spreadsheet, or in a restaurant setting into a till. You can actually spend more time on the human interaction if you understand to use that creativity in the right way and actually give people permission to actually act and serve customers and so on. So it's really, really interesting. So I see some of the similar things, and I think you're absolutely right. They were already happening. The Gen Z were already demanding a different place to work. And one of the biggest challenges there is within our industry is also the labor shortage there is now, maybe up to 30% of the capacity that's needed just to open and close restaurants or hotels or whatever it is maybe come to that we have not been good enough to show the young people that that's actually an industry that can give you that kind of environment, which I actually think it can, but we just forgot to talk about it, actually reset the ways we're doing things. What does this mean for the we need to change our way of human? You talked about a more human leadership before as well. What does that mean for the CEO? Because the CEO is looking at this, and the CEO is always the one that's responsible for where the ship is going. It's the top person in any organization, and they have all this complexity. And how do they create clarity within all that? Because that's their job, you said in the beginning as well.
Yeah, I think there's two jobs, and this is sort of the backbone of the book, really. I think there's two jobs for a leader. So if you accept that any leader's role is to move something from A to B, so the role of the leader is to create momentum, create collective agency, whatever it is, to move something from A to B. That could be, running a restaurant for a shift, and by the beginning and the end of the shift, you've served so many customers, and you've moved something from A to B. It could be a complete transformation. It could be a big transformation that's going to last 5 years. It doesn't really matter. The principle is the same, and therefore the two jobs of the leader, if we really simplify it, is to create clarity and to get out of the way. So to create clarity and to create space. And so that's no different for a CEO, actually, it is for any leader, because the most important thing for a CEO is to be a custodian for the conditions in the organization. So you are there to make sure that the conditions are right for people to be able to move things from A to B. And so the clarity side of that, I mean, we might touch on the other side of it in terms of getting out of the way, but the clarity side of that, what I find here is, leaders really need space to make sense of clarity in order to be able to communicate it. So there's three kind of elements I tend to think about here in creating clarity. One is to set the scene. So what is the general outline of where we're going and why are we doing it? I mean, when we just talk about Gen Z, they want to know why. They're not there just to show up and do a shift and walk home again. They want to know why they're doing it. In actual fact, that's true of all of us, really, isn't it? So creating that compelling vision, then secondly, being able to colour that in with the next level of detail. And I think co-creating that is fantastic. This isn't about being dictatorial about it. It's about inviting everybody in. The job of the CEO or any leader is to ensure that clarity exists, not to dictate the clarity. It might be quicker sometimes to dictate the clarity, but you might find that you're not the best person to necessarily do that. And also, is everybody on board if you do that? But if you do that together, then everybody is marching in the same direction. It enables you to step away because, you have trust that you don't have to keep dipping in and checking in things and steer and course correcting because everybody is generally in the right direction. So that is critical. And I think whenever you think you've got clarity, you have to check. So the piece about communication to me is not, oh, I stood up in a town hall and, told everybody this is what we're doing, or we'd run some focus groups, we'd got your feedback, and now here we all are, this is what we're doing. It's constantly that process of having people repeat back to you, where are we going and why? And test it, see how it's working. That two-way communication is the lifeblood of making sure that you have got clear parameters as an organization. Without them, you're going to waste a lot of time and a lot of money because people are going to think they're doing the right thing, but sort of head off in different directions. And your focus will be taken away. And so that really is a core responsibility of any leader. And what I would say is, if you, I have a phrase with it, two phrases within this that I think is really important. One is brilliant, simplistic phrase, always to ask ourselves as leaders is, what is the point? Do I understand what the point of this is? Does everybody else understand what the point of it is? What is the point? It gives you your why, it gives you sort of your where. The other key simplicity is when you resource an organization, when you specify work in an organization, when people need to know, well, I'm doing this job or I'm doing that or I'm working on that project, it all has to come back to the work. And the work comes from the difference between where you are today and where you want to be tomorrow. That work and understanding that work is sort of the purpose of having clarity. So I think I've just distilled about a third of the book in one answer, probably in quite a long-winded way.
It's interesting because you always talk about clarity and direction is one of the CEO roles, and then it's getting the right people on the bus and sometimes the wrong people off the bus when they're not fitting, and then build a culture where it's possible to do your best work and then get out of the way, as you say. So how do they, because I guess all these changes and away from, in principle, I think Daniel Pink, he calls it autonomy, giving people more autonomy to do their work. I guess it also means it's not just a change up here in your mindset and approach and how the CEO thinks leadership. It's also a way the whole organization is working. How exactly, we learned very quickly that people can work from home and do their job. They can have that autonomy to do that. Do you think there's going to be a bigger movement to it? There's been a lot of talk over the last couple of years about, self-organized organization where actually, you involve the employees in running the business and they actually, that group, smaller groups will take their own decisions. That doesn't have to be approved somewhere in the organization. They know what the direction, the vision of the business is. They're very clear about that. They've been part of developing it. Also, they know which principles they need to take decisions on. They know the values that underlines that. And actually, you need less management and leadership from the top.
I completely agree with that. And I think I feel like people are just brilliant on the whole. And I in all of my years, have I ever come across anybody who I genuinely think has woken up in the morning and got out of bed and thought, I'm going to do a bad day's work today? I mean, I haven't. But I have come across lots of people who don't really understand where they're meant to be going, whether anyone cares about the thing that they're working on, And so that's why I came to this principle of clarity. And actually, I think of it as there's two different visual things I use in the book. So one is the wings of a butterfly. So when I think about creating clarity and creating space or getting out of the way, you have to do both because they're synchronous. They rely on each other. So you can't actually, as a leader, get out of the way and not manage the situation if you haven't created enough or ensured there is enough clarity. equally, it's quite difficult to ensure clarity and make sense in a straightforward way if you haven't got enough space yourself to do the sense making and the thinking and to consider your impactful communications and so on. So that sort of sense that this is a butterfly is quite an interesting dynamic. And at the back of the book, I give people kind of different tools that they can think about how to actually incorporate these ideas into their working day, into their working week. So the butterfly is one. The other one is right at the end of the book. I talk about this concept between push leadership and magnetic leadership. And what I mean by that, I'm not talking about push leadership as command and control. What I'm talking about is often we find ourselves as leaders. I mean, gosh, I was in a meeting earlier, end of the last week, with some senior leaders, and they had the same moan that I hear from lots of people, which is, why is it that I have to keep getting involved? All the decision making keeps rising up to us, etc. I hear this so much. And the issue is that you could potentially be sort of slightly stuck in push leadership. And what that means is everything relies on me. So I have a group of people who are working with me, but everything relies on me making things happen. So everyone's looking to me for direction and I'm providing the direction. It's a passivity kind of thing. It's exhausting for leaders, actually. What works better is to get to a situation where you've got magnetic leadership, where you are there, you are creating the conditions, so you've created the clarity, such that everyone who is working around you is almost in orbit. So they are pulled towards that idea. You don't have to push it out because you're like a lighthouse. People can see it and they come towards it, but they use their own initiative. So you move away from that passivity and you move more into this whole concept of people bringing their brilliant, capability into the interpretation of what that clear direction means. So that again, so there's the butterfly, and then there's this idea of sort of push leadership versus magnetic leadership. And that becomes this amazing kind of self-reinforcing aspect, because the more you do of it, the more capable people around you are, the more you are able to create more of a beam of clarity that attracts in more. You don't have to be the CEO to be doing this. You can be anyone in any leadership position. And when I coach clients, we talk about creating microclimates. So doing this kind of work, showing up in this way, being brave, and creating a microclimate, because it doesn't just create a microclimate in your bit of the organization. It can actually then ripple around and people are like, oh, wow, what's happening over there? And then other people come to learn. So you can have leadership influence. You don't have to wait for others in your organization or higher up than you to demonstrate these kinds of shifts.
And it's so interesting what you're saying here. My own experience is also when I've been leading teams, a very concrete example, I was put in charge of a team that was underperforming. And what I normally have done was turn teams around. So and I was a bit more wise. I find out I shouldn't dictate where we're going. I should involve them in where we're going. And very quickly, I came to that magnetic situation because I actually made them create the plan. And I can remember my senior leader said, what did you do? I asked them what, in principle, very simply, that was not a simple process. We had a couple of sessions around it, but I actually asked them, what is the plan? Where do you want to go with this? What do you know that I don't know? So I actually just helped them clarify their own knowledge and actually set in some kind of structure. And then they just started moving along with the project. But the thing was, my boss didn't like that, because he liked that the boss actually said, here's the plan. And this is what we're going to do. Said, they're not going to do their job. They said, I promise you, by the end of the year, the result's going to be twice as good as we put in the plan. And they were 3 times as good. And my only job was walking around. You call it a lighthouse. I just called it the conductor. I was just finding out, actually, why is that person not feeling on top of themselves today? What do I need to do to get that person to be the best version of themselves? Because we had created the clarity. And it was not a big team. It was a team of 15, but we outperformed many, many, many other teams just because of that. But that was also, it took me some experience to get there, and I was really interested in it. But it's so powerful, you say, and it's about actually getting people involved because they actually know the plan, I think. And that's what we forget in leadership often. The people that are out there every day know the plan that needs to be developed better than you do as the senior person.
I think, most people, whatever their job is, this is just as straightforward as the example that we've all known for years and heard about for years about the person sweeping the floor at NASA, and somebody asked what their job was, and they said it was putting a man on the moon. I mean, it's this is purpose in action. This is helping everybody to feel a sense of purpose and a sense of belonging. And actually, if you get to belonging, so people feel they belong, when I feel I belong, I get into flow. Then I'm going to do my best work. I'm not going to feel restricted. I'm not. And actually, when I think about some of the challenges we've been trying to deal with in sort of thriving cultures for, say, the last 10, 15, 20 years, maybe more, but say specifically that time frame on things like diversity and inclusion. If you create a magnetic culture, it automatically enables everybody to be themselves because it doesn't matter, it's about the outcome. Whereas if you're in a push culture situation, it's really, really hard to invite lots of because there's one way. And so many leaders, I think, I feel the way I work with leaders is really, really a partnership, because I've been there too, on a day-to-day basis. Getting your head above water for long enough to do the work on yourself and the thinking is really, really hard to then bring that into your workplace, because you get to Friday evening and you're just grateful that you've made it through the week. And your calendar's full and you've just about solved this problem and that problem. But the issue is the next week you sort of go in and do the same. And the difference between moving from that into something which is so much more fulfilling for you as the leader, as well as everyone around you, is enabling yourself to have some space. And that is the difference. And it's a brave choice, but it's actually not as difficult, I think, as many leaders think that it is to create that space.
One of the things I was thinking about, Paula, as you were talking there as well, is that do you think there is also, with this shift that's coming where people are talking about, one of the things I'm really interested in a moment is creating the self-managed organization. We touched a bit about, do you think a lot of leaders are scared of that? What that mean? Because that doesn't mean they lose their job. It maybe just mean they're actually going to have a better job, and their role is not going to be managing the task, but it's going to be managing the direction. As I often say, that we still need you because we need your wisdom. We need your knowledge about how the clients, the organization work, all the emotional things you can't put into a computer and actually classify in a way. Are you seeing the same thing? There's this fear in the mid-management and also in the senior that actually, this pull through that we're putting all the autonomy and decision power out in the front line, if we say so. Actually, it's a bit of a threat, and they don't know what to do with that, and they feel a bit it's overwhelming, and on top of they have to deal with business complexity.
Yeah, I think it's two things. So one is, I think, when we talked at the beginning about this, this change is happening, you've got this choice. Do you resist it, or do you, celebrate the opportunity that you don't, there's no God-given right that you reach a certain point on a hierarchical structure chart and you've arrived. I think you almost have to think of it the other way around. The higher up I get on this organizational structure chart, the less I know and the more learning I have to do and the more open I have to be to that. And that I think is a mindset shift. It's a fundamental mindset shift. And it is scary, I think, for many people, where I think we've been led to believe that you kind of make your way up this ladder, and it isn't that way. It's the opposite. Well, actually, no, you become more vulnerable. You become more at risk. But if you're not able to resist that, you actually create much more risk for yourself than if you do, create a learning mindset. So I think I think partly it's that. I think the other thing that is at play, in my view, at very senior levels, is it's about deep self-awareness. And so I think many people, say the right things, and they do believe them, whether it's about empowerment, whether it's about including people, whether it's about inclusivity, etc. The real challenge is understanding as a leader that these human things in organizations, if you believe these things, then it's you. It's you. You have to do something different. You have to show up differently every day. You have to change. It's not something you can delegate. It's not something you can create a project team around who will then go and solve it. And I think it's this understanding that human leadership deeply starts with me, the leader, being human myself, and my own awareness of that. It doesn't mean I'm suddenly some kind of perfect psychological expert, spiritual person, who understands everything about human nature. That's not what I mean. It's more about me understanding my imperfections and embracing them, and not feeling like I have to show up as the person who has all the answers. And I think it feels to me like we're in this process at the moment where we've got these two tides, a tide coming in and a tide going out. And I think there are many leaders who are caught in that tidal change and are finding it quite difficult to know, what to do and how to be. The answer to it is you need to be yourself. And that might mean doing some things that feel a little bit scary, but it's okay because nobody's actually expecting you to have all the answers. I'll give you an example of employee engagement. And increasingly, organizations are expected to have the voice of the employee represented in key decision making in their organization. This is increasingly coming through, whether it comes through in regulation or whether it just comes through in what's expected or even what employees expect. And many leaders find it really difficult to hear this feedback and not feel that they have to then, sometimes they feel defensive about the feedback, or sometimes they feel like they need to have the answers to it. Whereas in actual fact, if you talk to the employee, or even if you just think, me as an employee myself, I'm not expecting anybody else to have all the answers. What I want is a conversation. What I want is to be seen and heard. And I think actually that can feel quite scary for leaders, because it's that moment where you're, I could be stood in a room of, quite a lot of people who are feeling quite emotional about something, and I might not be able to make it all right. But in actual fact, by acknowledging it and saying you work on it together, you are making things right. What's expected. No one wants you to have all the answers because they want to be involved in having the answers together or working it through. So I think that's a real life example of this sort of tension playing out. And I would just really encourage leaders to have a go at being in places where they don't know everything. It's amazing. It'll never be as bad as you think it's going to be.
It's so interesting you say, Paula. We recently started some work, and I'm heading it up, and I'm meeting this founder of a business, and there's some really good things happening. Been some really challenging things, and this founder is very keen on moving decision power down in exactly the problem you said. Why are they coming to me with all this stuff? So I said, okay, well, let's move it to a more autonomy. There's a freedom framework of freedom. And then he said, yeah, let's get started. What is the first initiative? And you could hear in a way that he was not, when we had these early conversation, he was not there. And actually my advice was as well, I think we need to start with you. And we just stay there for a little bit. And it's okay. You don't need to go out and launch an initiative. You need to tell the organization what you're doing. We start with you and the nearest people around you. And then we try some things out. and then we experiment what works for you. And actually, it is an experiment. I think if you can accept that you don't have to have an answer, there don't need to be an algorithm, actually you can go on that journey and actually discover things, a bit like Frodo in Lords of Rings. He goes on this journey, but he doesn't know what hits him in a way, but he goes on it, and he became the hero on the journey because he's open to change and adapting and go through some hard times and good times. So I think I almost said to him, like, you're almost creating a Netflix series to actually improve your organization. Of course, you need to have that hook every time something new happens, but you need to start with you, because else, if the hero, as you are, the founder of an organization, you are in the early days, and when you say, okay, you are the hero, you need to find out what's going on inside there. So I think that was really good advice, and I can see that, and that's scary for many, because that means actually you maybe need to confront something that there's there that you don't want to confront, as you said. What about yourself, Paula? You've been, your leader, advisor, you said in the beginning as well. What has been your biggest learning? Because I guess you've gone through some shift, and where you are now, where you are totally advising, but you're not part of an organization. But what is like your biggest learning? Where do you think the biggest shift was for you that took you to where you are today?
It's about space, to be perfectly honest with you. And I sort of go on and on about this quite a lot, because I think it is one of the most important aspects of leadership, is the yin and yang of dynamic action and space to make sense of things. And so the biggest learning for me, and I was in an executive position at the time, and I was exhausted. I should think everyone around me was exhausted, because I was always one of those kind of A-type, go, 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 let's kind of make stuff happen. Had about 10 million ideas, plus the business had to run itself, as well operationally. But I did this thing at one point where I've always had this thing where if I feel a bit overwhelmed, I just take myself away, and I just get a large piece of paper always, and I just dump down everything. And you can usually actually make quite a lot of sense and prioritize things. And if you've got that question in your mind, what's the point? About 3 things pop up, and the rest of it is white noise. You can kind of find a way of losing it. But I did that at quite a significant level. So I kind of took myself off on my own version of a retreat. So all I did was I just cleared my calendar for 3 days. It was my calendar. I just left. I could go on holiday and leave my calendar for a week. Let me find some space in normal working times, because this is part of my job. And it just keeps getting pushed to the fringes, because every week I think I'm going to do this and I don't. So I gave myself 3 days. I actually took a couple of people with me. I didn't go anywhere. I just came home. But I invited a couple of people to do some thinking with me. And we really came up with 3 main things. And it's one of the tips I've actually got in the back of the book, which is always have in mind, and I was thinking 3s. It doesn't have to be in 3s, but, in 3 years' time, what are the 3 things that I will have done that will have been strategic change? Because that's what my job is. Everyone else can run the operation. I'm here to try and sort of got the systemic view to make some sort of transformation happen. And it enabled me to use it on a daily basis. So, I talked right at the beginning about being very pragmatic. Those 3 things were in my mind every week. And it enabled me to streamline my diary. There's all these sorts of things that I thought, I need to be in that, or someone needs me here, or just because of my job title, you're invited to this and you're invited to that. And I just took control of it. I just stopped doing a lot of things, and I created the space that I needed. I put it in first, and I used a tool which I'd used as a mum. So when I first became a mum, I had this thing that I used in my calendar called Purple Time. That's just what I called it, because it was highlighted in purple in my calendar. And it was all the times when I had to be on pick up or drop off duty, or I had to do something with the children. So I thought I should use Purple Time for other stuff that's important when I need space. I can't show up as my best self. And I had one particular example where I'd been working flat out. There'd been a particular issue. I'd been responding to it. Other things were meant to happen. I'd come back to this work a couple of months later. It didn't really look like I had anticipated And I didn't react very well because I didn't have emotional equilibrium. I didn't have control of my emotions at that point in time. What I did do was I came back the next day and said to everybody, I'm really sorry, I didn't react very well to that. Um, and that's my worst moment, but sometimes you have those moments and you think, I need to create this space for myself. Otherwise, I can't show up properly for everybody else. So that's my biggest learning, is about space and the space required to make sense of that complexity and keep it simple.
You talk about space, and I've seen so many things you've done on LinkedIn, and some of the things I had to do myself at some point as well, especially when you run your own business. It can become quite all-consuming because you think you forget all the good things you learned in your leadership training. You're going to start your own business, just forget all about that because suddenly everything is on you, your family's wealth and all those things. One of the things I found out as well was I call it monk mornings, where actually 3 days a week I have time set aside where there's no meetings, there's coming nothing. It's just for, my mentor called it strategic thinking. I just do things that actually I believe is strategic important for me as an individual and the business. It's so powerful, and you think you're going to miss out. And there's things I don't go to, or network meetings, stuff like that. But I've done this for 2 years. I have not missed out on anything, especially pandemic, where a lot of people want to do a lot of online stuff. I just said, I can't. I can do it in the afternoon. That's it. Because there's no meetings in the mornings. And now I'm down to 4 days a week where there's this time. And sometimes it's just getting a piece of work done, or communicating and working with people on that specific thing, instead of, I'm going to a meeting. Because I think also, if you as the CEO, I don't know if you agree with that, or the founder or the leader of any team, have this thing, you're running from one meeting to the other, that's what your people are going to do, and nothing is going to get done. So you have this shadow you throw. And it's quite interesting that you had the same kind of thing, like create space in your diary, and you're not going to miss out on anything. You're going to be involved in exactly the things you need to be involved in.
I think that's absolutely, I love the point about we all have FOMO, so we think we've got to be kind of running the whole time. But I think it comes almost from a sort of an inner confidence as well, that you have to cultivate within yourself, that you aren't going to miss anything, and what's important will come to you. But if we feel our importance is because of this generation of stuff that we're doing the whole time, it's actually really the opposite, in truth. There's another piece to it, actually, also, which is not just this is what your people will do if that's what you do, which is really true. But also, if I think one of the most important things as a leader is to be calm, because if you're calm and you have an emotional, it doesn't mean you're not emotional and you don't show emotion, but you have emotional equilibrium, is the way I would describe it. If you have that and you are conscious of how you're feeling and how you're reacting, you're gonna invite so many more people to feel that they can come and speak to you and have conversations with you, and you need that, because you need people to be constantly touching base with you. And I had something the other day where someone was talking about this issue where if we're busy the whole time, we say we've got an open door policy, we say we want to meet with people, but they can't meet with us for another 3 weeks, and except, I mean, I've been there and I've struggled with that, and it's really, really hard to create that sense of calm and presence for other people, but that is actually a huge part of the job.
In all these learnings you had, is there like something, a book or some people that has been very influential to you and actually shaped the way you think and the way you have become a leader, even though you don't lead an organization anymore, you're a leader of yourself now, as I would say. But what is there, like two or three things where people you met on your journey that really helped you make those shifts?
Yeah, well, the first person I would always come back to, and my book is dedicated to him, and it is my dad. And I know it might sound a bit typical in a way to say this, but my dad, he had nothing. He left school with no qualifications, grew up on a council estate, social housing, youngest of four. He rose up into senior management in a multinational automotive company. And he did all of that on his own. But the most amazing thing about him was that everything he did was completely based on the question, what is the point? So, he just used to get fed up with all the nonsense in organizations and all the positioning, the politics, all of those sorts of things. And he was able to cut through it in a way. He used humor, he used his ability to say no. But, it's amazing. We sometimes think we can't say no because there might be some consequence. I think he just felt like, I'm just going to, this doesn't make any sense. I'm not doing that. And it was never, unfair to anybody. It was always absolutely with respect. But I learned a lot about, really asking the question, what is the point of this, from him? And maybe my pragmatism comes from him. I don't know, but that was certainly a huge influence on me. I think the other thing, and that there's lots of things, but I worked for a wonderful boss in my first management job. And what she used to do, and I think this is a really important point about creating accountability with people, which is one of the things that you want to try and create in your teams. It's not about involving people because it's a nice thing to do. You want to involve people so that they feel, yes, they can bring their creativity and the ideas, but they're also accountable for what they're delivering so that you can step away from it with trust. But she used to do it in such a way that she would say things to me like, well, this is a fantastic piece of work. I know you're going to be doing this anyway. It made me think about things like this. And I'd be sitting there on the other side of the table thinking, I haven't thought about that at all. And this wasn't a draft. This was my final, copy of this thing. But the way that she spoke to me meant that there was no criticism. I knew exactly what I needed to do. She had belief in me and I didn't want to let her down. But I wanted to support her. But I was left with the job. I was left with the work to do. And I thought that was such a clever way of encouraging that, rather than criticizing someone so they have to go and lick their wounds for 2 hours because they feel rubbish because they didn't quite do good enough. I just loved the way that felt for me. And I've stolen that and tried to take that forward as much as I can in the way that I engage with people as well. I just thought it was really powerful. And then the only final thing I would share is that there's a book. So my favorite book, and I didn't read it till maybe 2017, I think it's quite recently, but it helped me understand a huge amount about people and people at work and how things are working out. It's an Ekhart Tolle book. It's A New Earth. I absolutely adore it. So he wrote The Power of Now, but I love A New Earth. And I think if you can get to a stage where you really understand ego and understand how ego is at work in ourselves and in others, your ability to interact with people, which is what leadership is all about, is hugely enhanced. So it's not a business book. It's a book about people.
Super interesting. I haven't read that book. I just wrote it down, and we're going to put it in the show notes for sure. What do you think this, all this shift means when you look at, leaders that are successful right now? I look a lot at the Prime Minister of New Zealand and, many female leaders, the Danish Prime Minister in the country I came from. They had a good start on the pandemic, and seems like they not just kept the numbers down, but there's also taken their countries through. And I know we're talking about maybe smaller countries here, and I don't think that's relevant anyway. The smaller big countries, the German chancellor as well, Merkel is a female as well. Is there anything we can learn from that? Because there's a lot of people that's been analyzing on that. What is your view on that? Because they're definitely doing something in crisis that we haven't seen maybe in more male-led countries have achieved the same kind of calmness and clarity as they have created for their countries.
Really fascinating, isn't it? And I think history will help us understand this more. But there's a couple of things I think are interesting about that. So one is, you know how, so I probably understood, I feel quite no nonsense about stuff. And I think children are brilliant in kind of helping us to stay honest about things. And one of the things that, when my children look at leadership, and they're 12 and 15, two girls, looking around the world at everything they've been exposed to about the way that this pandemic was managed, the thing they remember is Jacinda Ardern standing up and saying the tooth fairy is a key worker. And that was the thing that they remember of any leader saying anything. And it really exemplifies what you're talking about, which is it's a humanistic approach. It's about being able to interpret the situation as we are experiencing it as humans, a human to human, as opposed to managing the task of project managing the situation. And that isn't to say you don't have to project manage it. I mean, God, this is the biggest project management, complex issue that the world has probably ever faced collectively. But the communication style of it was, we're in it together. I'm not here as a politician more important than you, that I can't discuss the things that might just bring a little bit of, a collective, joining up of us, together, and how we're experiencing it together. So I think that humanity is what's being expressed. And one of the things that I think is really interesting, and I think is increasingly on the rise and important when we think about sort of more humanistic leadership. This isn't about men and women particularly, when I say this. It is about rebalancing the masculine and the feminine in workplaces. And it's really interesting, isn't it? I think this imbalance towards the more masculine, sort of energy, the things that would be classed, if you sort of think about feminine and masculine energies, this whole idea of sort of hard facts, data, money, those types of things, as more important than and having more weighting than these, things about feelings or things about sustainability or how we connect together, long-term outcomes of sort of society that might be more on the feminine side, the sort of the, leading with heart. I actually talk quite a lot about leading with heart, because it sort of rises up this idea of sort of the feminine energy. And it's not that you want to rebalance it so that there's no masculine energy and there's only feminine energy. To me, it's about, it genuinely is about just a balance, coming back into balance, so that all of these things, which are all relevant in our human experience, become relevant and replicated in our work experiences in the same balance. And I think it's been out of balance in society, and I think it's been completely out of balance in work. And I think that is why we have seen a difference in our ability to include more females in the workplace at the pace at which we'd like, at the levels at which we'd like as seniority. However, it isn't really just about males and females. It's about those different energies. I know there's plenty of male senior leaders who would love to be able to embrace more of the feminine energy in the way that they show up at work. And I think it's happening. And I think it's been accelerated by the last year. And I think it's all our responsibility. It's not just the responsibility of leaders, it's everybody's responsibility to ensure that our workplaces, where we spend most of our time, replicate the sort of broader societal, requirements of what being a human is about, and of ultimately the human experience is both of those things, not one or the other. And I think sort of recalibrating that balance at a fundamental level will mean a lot of the problems that we're trying to fix will be fixed. It's like getting to root cause rather than trying to deal with symptom. And my fear is, if we try to deal with these symptoms, whether it's environmental issues, mental health, some of those broader kind of issues, with an imbalance of masculine and feminine energy, we will try to address them as tasks. And I think it won't work, because I think that's what we've been trying to do. So I don't know if that makes sense, but to me, that whole idea of rebalancing masculine and feminine energies is such an interesting opportunity. progress in the human age.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right, because there is probably something about the root cause to many, many issues that's not only to do with organizations, but also the survival of our planet, our species, and so on, comes from imbalance in some kind of way. And I was thinking about a quote as you were talking, and it's a bit like from a movie I watched when I was a young boy. It's called Karate Kid, where Mr. Miyagi says to the boy, "It's all about balance." And then, martial arts is all about balance as well, and creating the space so you react in the right way. And I think that was what I was thinking as you were explaining that. We're coming to the end of a very super interesting conversation. As I said in the beginning, this is something I'm extremely passionate about. I've learned so much, Paula, to have this conversation with you. But if we should leave leaders out there with 3 advice, what will your top 3 advice be? I could hear you like the rule of 3 as you were talking as well. What is your 3 pragmatic advices you can give to leaders out there in all the complexity they're in right now?
So, yeah, I do love a 3. The first one is to really seek deep clarity for yourself and for others. And that is deep clarity, but with a simplified way of expressing it. So it's just hard, right? But deep clarity doesn't mean adding more complexity and more information and more confusion. It's deep clarity with a simplified message. That's the first thing. The second thing is just there's a brilliant piece of research that I refer to in the book by the Work Foundation. It's not new. It was done in 2010. And they looked at the difference between great leaders and average leaders, or outstanding leaders, I think was their comment. And one of 9 things was take a breath and hold it longer. And by that, this is my second point, be create space for other people to be creative and accountable. So, we can't complain that people aren't accountable if we haven't given them the space to be so. We can't complain that we're not getting the most creativity and problem solving if we haven't given people the space to be so. And that will mean that you as the leader may have to sit with some discomfort, because your comfortable place is to go for the answer. But as soon as you start feeling uncomfortable, I don't care what you do, do anything, but leave it longer. Take a breath and leave it longer. So that's the second thing. The third one is the same about creating space, but this is about creating space for you to broaden your curiosity, really. So a leader that isn't learning, having a growth mindset, constantly just looking outside their sphere of expertise for different ways of influencing how they continue to grow, I think is a leader who, is going to plateau at some point. I think to continue to grow, you have to be constantly learning. So creating space for curiosity, and in that, challenging the status quo. When I talked about when you create clarity, one of the things you create clarity around is what is the actual work that needs to be done. Everything else falls away. The way you've done it in the past, the structure of your organization, all of that. If everything fell away and you were left with this is the work that needs to get done, how would you do it? And a leader who has the curiosity to innovate in their own mind and to think, what a joyful thing to be able to do, even in times of real challenge, which I know, and we're talking within, your podcast, this industry, who have been through so much challenge in the last year and a half. It might feel odd to think that you could find some joy in that, but I think that that is your creativity at work as a leader. And that is going to bring an energy into spaces and organizations which is really needed, and a positive energy, because in order to find new ways of doing things, to create the next iteration, to not get left behind, organizations need leaders who are creating space for creativity and curiosity themselves. So they're the 3 things that I would encourage people to focus on as leaders. And so that is your job.
And that could be for many definitely a big change, and you can take it in steps. But I love the clarity. Take the time to breath. I call it monk mornings, whatever it is you put in place. And then that, that hunger for learn and unlearn in principle. So you have capacity to learn something new. I think that's really, really great advice. Where can people find out more, Paula? What can they, I guess they can go on Amazon or wherever to get your book. We'll put a link in the show notes as well. But if they want to know more about what you do and some of the other things you write about, where should they go?
Yeah, so my website is vantagepointsconsulting.com. There's a blog on there every week as well that I also put up on LinkedIn. So you can find me on LinkedIn, Paula Leach. I also do quite a bit of slightly different content on Instagram. So my Instagram handle is @Vantage Points Consulting. And yeah, the book is called Vantage Points, How to Create a Culture Where Employees Thrive. And on Amazon and lots of other outlets as well. And on e-reader. So you can get it on Kindle. It's not just hard copy book.
Good. Thank you so much for coming on to the show and share all your wisdom, knowledge, and insight you accumulated over the years and your view on how leadership will evolve over the years. I'm sure there's a lot out there that are going to get a lot out of this and a lot of reflection coming out of this. So I send you all the power and energy you need as well to move forward in this new world. And I'm sure we're going to catch up at some point, even maybe here on the show again, talking about leadership as we move out of the pandemic, maybe, because there's maybe a new shift coming that we even haven't seen yet.
Thank you, Michael. It's been a wonderful conversation. And thank you to your listeners and good luck with what I know is a big changing industry. So lots of changes, lots of opportunities.
Thank you so much, Paula, for sharing your insights and wisdom with us around leadership and the transformation we need to go through. If you want to learn more about how you become a better leader and become more effective as a leader, I will recommend you to visit episode 54, Lead with Compassion with Gina Garnier. We'll be talking about empowerment and transformational leadership. And if you enjoyed today's conversation, please share, rate, review, or subscribe to one of our channels. A big thank you to BizSimply for supporting us, bringing great insights, strategies, and tools to help the industry thrive, not just survive. Check them out at bizsimply.com or on their social @BizSimply or BizSimplyHQ. You can also email them directly on advice@bizsimply.com. A big thank you to Fina Charlton, the show producer and editor from the Podcast Collective. Tune in next time for another interview, and in the meantime, find out more about us and subscribe to our community and download free leadership tools at hospitalitymavericks.com. And don't worry, if you didn't get all of this, there will be links in the show notes. Thank you, and be Maverick.